Welcome to the Nerd Party.
One, two, Nick is coming for you. 3, 4, better lock your door. 5, 6, grab a crucifix. 7, 8, better stay up late. 9, 10, you'll never sleep again. Hello and welcome to the A24 project here on the Nerd Party, the only podcast that takes you through the entire back catalogue of A24, reviews the latest releases, and brings you interviews with the people behind these movies. I'm your co-host Dallas King, and with me as always, the dream scenario for this podcast to be found is the Donald Kaufman to my Charlie Kaufman. It's Lee Hutchison. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really good. I'm really excited to talk about this one. I think this is our last A24 film that we get to maybe talk about this year, unless sort of things start dropping in the UK. But yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this one. A real highlight.
Yeah. So on today's show, we are going to be reviewing Christoph Borgli's Dream Scenario, which results in the dream scenario of righting a wrong. We've been doing this podcast a long time and have reviewed pretty much 148 film releases that have been released by A24, and so far none of them have starred Nicolas Cage. Now, given the fact that he is a man who seems at times to hardly ever say no to a movie, it just seems very odd that it's taken this long for the paths to cross. But Lee, I guess you're excited to finally be able to talk about Nick Cage on the A24 podcast in what turns out to be one of his better performances.
Absolutely, yeah. I think there's one of those ones that it's one of the most annoying turns of phrases where people talk about like A24 vibes and like Pig. That could have been an A24 film. I mean, like Neon is pretty much parallel to A24 in terms of how kind of quite selective they are with their filmography, etc. And then I think there was so many people that like as soon as they saw that unbearable weight of massive talent going, oh, that's definitely got A24 vibes, which I must admit, I know it was a loved film by a lot of people that were really in on it. I really didn't enjoy that film whatsoever, and I was kind of, I think that one certainly seemed to flop, didn't it?
Yeah, I did enjoy that one, but I wouldn't have classified it as A24 vibes. No, I think a bit too meta for A24. But before we dive into the film, time for some A24 news. Now, if anyone listened to the previous episode, we were talking about the future of A24, given the potential move into IP content. You know, how are they going to navigate the next couple of years moving forward, especially in the world of streaming? And we were discussing, how's A24 going to be able to compete with something like Apple or Paramount Plus or something like that? Turns out we got the answer today, actually, a couple of hours just before the podcast dropped. They launched the very own A24 app, which unfortunately for you listeners outside of the US, is only available in the US for reasons which we discussed last week, and the fact that A24 are an American-only distributor, dipping the toe in the water of the UK, of course, but internationally, all those films are released by different distributors. So the A24 app gives you exclusive behind-the-scenes content and videos on all of their releases, but also the opportunity, all within one app, to be able to download, rent, or purchase A24 films in America. So, Lee, you would have got the same email that I did as an AAA24 member. What did you make of this news dropping conveniently, almost actually prior to our podcast recording for a change?
Yeah, I think we saw it, obviously, when they sort of trialed a bit of this app with it's got behind-the-scenes clips, etc. I think they were giving it kind of a soft launch a few weeks and months ago. I remember trying to download it, and it was like, couldn't do it through any sort of kind of the UK platforms or anything like that. You would have to go America, and it's one of those ones, I think, again, sort of telling, as we've kind of said all along, that unfortunately A24, as we need to remind it, are an American distributor, and all of anything that's A24 that's being released in the UK is very rarely A24. I think we've still only maybe on 3 films at most at the moment, and then the rest are maybe Universal, or they've got all their rights kind of banged up. And while this might be the closest someone's going to get to an A24 streaming app, the idea that something like that could exist in the UK and beyond is just never going to happen.
No, unless A24, I guess, become so successful that they move full time into the UK and then buy back the rights to all those films, which I can't see them doing anytime soon or at all, because I think it'd be far too complicated and far too expensive now, I think.
Yeah, you saw actually, funnily enough, with Warner Brothers this week, where I think actually just a few hours ago they were talking about how actually, that we've got our HBO Max, sorry, we've got the Max streaming service, but what we're going to do is we're actually just going to look at maybe selling content and so on, which we kind of spoke about a few times, that is the best option for people. Like the cost that A24 would invest in their own streaming platform and having to get subscribers, etc., would be crazy. Even like you see it as you talk about buying back the rights, for example. You've seen so many folk like kind of Peacock in America, like Universal buying back shows that they sold years ago, or Paramount going, actually, we want all the Star Trek under our banner, so we're going to buy back the rights. The amount of money people spend, and they're not making any money off the back of it. The best way to go is just make your content, sell it, distribute it. Like, that is the safest way to not go bankrupt, and A24 probably made the best decision of just going, here's a website where you can basically just rent stuff, keep it nice and simple.
Exactly, yeah. It's like, why give someone else the money when we can get money coming to us? Why get them to go pay for it through iTunes when they can pay for it through the app? But I'm just wondering, just double check that all the films are there. Oh yeah, no, Under the Silver Lake is still there. The film which they didn't really give much of a release in cinemas is still at least available under the A24 app there. So yes, if you've been piqued by the work of David Robert Mitchell with the announcement that he's returning to the It Follows universe with They Follow, make sure to check out his 5-star banger that he filmed in between Under the Silver Lake. So there we go. But back to new releases and Dream Scenario, a film where the plot revolves around a hapless family man and tenured professor who finds himself turned into an overnight celebrity when he begins appearing in people's dreams at an exponential rate. At first, his appearances are passive and banal, but when the dreams start to take on a nightmarish turn, Paul is unable to deal with the vitriolic fallout of a situation beyond his control. So, Lee, were you excited to see this one?
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit, just a little bit.
Yeah, it's one of those ones I feel like I've mentioned this time and again where I try and avoid these trailers sometimes where I can. I mean, still not watched that Zone of Interest trailer yet. And in the
Neither have
past and in the past few weeks it feels like Saltburn and Dream Scenario have been dominating my local cinema for trailers. Like,
I can confirm it's the same at my local
yeah,
Cineworld as well.
I managed to avoid it for weeks of like they were online, but I was like, you know what, I want to be surprised by this Saltburn, so I'm finally seeing that tonight. The same with Dream Scenario. I knew Nicolas Cage appears in dreams. Fine enough for me. Watching the trailer a few times, it was kind of like, yeah, this looks fine. You know what? It's probably going to be another one of these kind of maybe slightly self-aware Nicolas Cage style movies. He's not maybe had the best run really since kind of Pig. I mean, I never went to see that Renfield, for example. As I mentioned, I thought The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent was an atrocious film, and it was so difficult to sit through that. So I kind of went into this on Saturday night off the back of a double bill of the Royal Hotel, the new Kitty Green film, and yeah, I kind of sat down, and within a few kind of minutes, I was like, I think this is such an enjoyable film. And it was one of these films where a rare Saturday night that I went to the cinema and I had a really good time with the film. Like, it's just so easy to watch, fun to talk about afterwards. It has great audience reaction kind of moments and so on. A really original piece of sort of accessible cinema that you could imagine families going along maybe to see, or others and so on. I think it was a real success, and I think it's one of those ones we talked recently about A24. Maybe they lose films on crazy budgets like Beau is Afraid, where you watch something like this and go, I could imagine this having an okay amount of budget, but I think it could make this back. I think this will get in audiences that didn't necessarily turn up for something like Beau is Afraid.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was looking forward to this one because, a number of reasons. Obviously, Nick Cage and an A24. Finally, the concept sounded interesting, But I think the main draw for me was actually the fact that it's directed by Christopher Borgley. Interesting fact, according to IMDb and the news articles, when the film was first mooted, apparently it was potentially going to be directed by Ari Aster. But eventually, I think he moved away to work on Beau's Afraid when he met Christopher Borgley, who directed a fantastic film from last year called Sick of Myself. Now, Lee, I know you haven't seen this, but I'm going to recommend it very, very
Oh
highly.
God, yeah, I'm
Um,
really keen to see it.
yeah, so it's about a woman who is. I mean, I would have actually titled this film "The Worst Woman in the World" rather than the other film called "The Worst Woman in the World," because she's so self-obsessed to the point where her boyfriend is an artist and he starts to get quite famous, and so in order to get attention back on herself, she actually gives herself a horrendous skin condition in order to gain sympathy from her boyfriend and from people in the press and the social media. And it in a typical, if this was an American film, she would learn the errors of her ways, and it would all become quite happy in the final act. She learns and grows as a character. That film doesn't do that. It doubles down on just how awful she is, and it's just one of the blackest, darkest comedies I've seen in a long time, and it was just fantastic. So I was very excited to see what he was going to do with this material, because it could go in many, many sort of different ways. And I'm really sort of pleased with sort of how it goes in here as well. So, I mean, like we said, the plot is, Nick Cage is a man who just randomly starts appearing in people's dreams. One of the major plus points of this film, I think, is it doesn't explain why or how. It's just, this is something that happens, just go with it. But he's sort of thrust into this position, which, he begrudgingly sort of accepts at the beginning, sort of becomes a bit of a minor celebrity. Good things can happen for him, and then it all sort of turns quite vicious and sad quite quickly, because that's what we do in society with celebrities, and we like to build people up, especially with reality TV and all that. We build people up, and then quite quickly we're ready to tear them down and tear them to shreds because they've done something which has upset us. And here is the fact that he's just appearing in the dreams, just sort of standing there giving a little wave or something, but then later on he starts actually attacking people in their dreams and stuff like that. So, I mean, Lee, hypothetical, I'm going to put it to you: if you started to appear in people's dreams and people started coming up to you and going, "What the hell, why are you in my dream?" how do you think you would handle it?
It's hard to imagine. I'm someone that I do like my privacy. I don't like to be like, I find just, I think of like work events where people are networking or coming up to you and wanting to talk about things. You're like, oh, hi, nice to meet you, blah, blah, blah. You're just kind of like, I'd rather just be with people I like, doing things I like, or just left completely alone and so on. And yeah, it's an interesting thing to imagine, because I suppose the reality is he is the everyman to an extent. We, for a lot of us, we're good at what we do, we get by, but there's never that notoriety or fame that kind of goes with it, where we get recognized. And you can imagine for all of us at all points of our life, whether you're someone that does a critic, or you have a hobby or an interest, you want someone to go, oh wow, who is that person? Oh wow, you're brilliant at that, even if it's just for a couple of days and stuff. Because I suppose we just have this idea that it's the great feeling, this dopamine hit, whereas probably the reality, you see it when you hear celebrities interviewed, is it's much more monotonous, it's tedious, etc. But for all of us, we probably just wish we had that little, even just that little taste of it once in our life. And I can imagine for someone like Paul, he'd be keen to give that a go. He's very much that background kind of person.
Yeah, and I mean, it's something that you could potentially have quite quickly on, say, something like Twitter or X, the social media platform formerly known as Twitter, where if you have a particularly hot take on something, you could get a lot of people praising you, but very quite quickly you will also find people coming in at you, telling you why you're incredibly wrong and hating on you as well and stuff like that.
It's
And I
Twitter,
think,
isn't it? Really, where you see with this rise of the stupid blue ticks, where me and a friend talked about it. It's very much that scarlet letter. Anytime I see someone that has paid for that blue tick, it is the most asinine comments, and you'll see people that will have genuine things, as you say, something lovely to say about a film or an experience, and there are these top replies underneath just saying the most racist, horrible, misinformed kind of stuff, and you're like, that's Joe Public, isn't it?
Yes, and I'm sure Joe Pug will be out in full force this weekend with the release of The Marvels, starring Brie Larson, who, for some reason, men in their 30s who live in their bedrooms in America seem to hate with a passion. So, yes, I'm sure they will be out telling everyone why their opinion of The Marvels is wrong, even though they have not gone to watch The Marvels and therefore don't really have a foot to stand on. But anyway, you mentioned the everyman there. This character is just a nobody, an everyman. So the fact that they cast Nick Cage in the role is quite something because he is at times got a quite larger than life sort of personality. What did you make of his performance? Is it sort of adaptation, Wild at Heart sort of levels, or is it the sort of Nick Cage who has appeared on sort of many direct to DVD films?
It's one of these ones. I put it in the probably the same ilk as something like Adaptation, for example, where you watch that and you're aware, like, oh, that's Nicolas Cage is the actor there, but it's such a kind of, as I say, it's that real life kind of character and stuff. It's not, you can see it with, I think there was a great article recently where they're interviewing Nicolas Cage, and he's an actor that performs in like italics and bold with his scripts and so on. Whereas this, he was someone that you were like, yeah, he is the everyone. He is playing it how I can imagine most people on the planet would deal with it. Then, for a lot of us, we might get completely blown over by the fame and so on and milk it. And that's the traditional Hollywood story, isn't it? Like, fame corrupts them and they go to, drugs and women and madness, and okay, maybe there's a tiny sliver of something like that, and then the fall is all the more dramatic. Whereas this is like what would happen of like, actually, this could be my chance to do my passion project, or when there becomes the challenges of like just taking it on the chin, but actually just getting really frustrated that things are out with your control, and it's never drama for the sake of drama. It just feels genuine and stuff, and the responses of that is how people would react, for better or worse. It's never a over the top performance, which I think really helps ground this film.
Yeah, I think that's certainly probably people who are familiar with Nicolas Cage would probably feel that, well, it's going to build to a point where he then goes full Cage, and the fact that he never does that, he never pushes the button, that is something that I really admire with his performance here. It is very restrained and subtle, and yeah, he just becomes, the ego and the celebrity just washes away, and it's just a man who trying to deal with an impossible situation, because there's lots of sort of moral quandaries, I guess, in here, in the fact that he's being publicly vilified for attacking people and causing them mental distress and stuff like that. There's a point where he gets fired from his job because none of the students want him to be there, and he's quite rightly sort of saying, well, I didn't do that. It's the version of me that they have in their head has done that. And I think this film, if anything else, is nothing else, is going to be a really interesting conversation starter afterwards about, what would you do in that situation? Who is right? Who is wrong? How do you deal? I mean, I think it's impossible to deal with something. I mean, when you get that so much, I guess it does touch into the sort of cancel culture, which, and actually, I think this time in this film, cancel culture is probably actually correct, because every other time I've seen people talk about cancel culture, it's not they're being cancelled, it's they're actually being held accountable for real stuff that they've actually done. Whereas in this film, Nicolas Cage his character has not actually done anything. It's just a version in their heads that has done the things. So therefore, it's actually really, actually, I think, yeah, it probably is the first time I've seen cancel culture properly portrayed and played out in the media.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and it's not necessarily subtle about the story it's kind of looking to tell and stuff. But what I think it does really well is to say there is a difference between the right wing, the the people, blue ticks, etc. All these kind of morons that talk about cancel culture, they are often talking about accountability culture, whether that's people that go after and target and trans individuals, for example, those that maybe look to kind of throw horrific comments out there, bullying and abusive behavior, and ultimately maybe lose their job or face the consequences. That's people being held accountable. Whereas cancel culture can happen and stuff. People that maybe just said the wrong thing, or just a moment of ignorance and stuff, and it can happen. It's as you say, it is important to differentiate between the two. But this is almost probably could play into that people's like worst case scenario of like, as you say, you have fame and it just all goes wrong and you get exposed or manipulated, etc. Things that are out with your control, that you get blamed for, you become the face of something. And that's an element where you feel sorry for Paul. You're not someone that's rooting for him to get into trouble, or you're like, oh, he did deserve that. Like, he is that person that gets caught in this kind of storm of going viral and fame and so on. And we certainly see there's very, very little upsides to it.
Yeah, and I mean, this is I guess it's got drama, it's got comedy. I mean, it's a very effective satire on a lot of different things. But what was interesting to me, sort of looking back on the film, was they could have gone down the route of showing a lot more of Paul in the media, of what the newspapers, what the radio shows, the podcasts, the TV shows were talking about from him. But it basically stays with him the whole story. You get the times when you hear about his appearances in dreams is where he's physically talking to someone and they tell him, oh, this is what happened and stuff like that. It's interesting that I think it's important that it keeps it self-contained within Paul's experience of it rather than showing what everyone else has experienced, because I think you then get more sympathy from, if you'd seen all the horrible things he was potentially doing in the dreams, you might potentially lose sympathy on him. But I think it's down to that, and Nick Cage's performance is what keeps it sort of focused on Paul, and why it's then more effective as a story. I mean, I think probably in the third act it does branch out a bit more into the wider world outside of Paul once part of his story is concluded, I guess. But before we sort of get into the sort of third act, and I guess it's not really spoilers per se, but it's more of the sort of satirical elements and shows where the film potentially could have gone a lot more. I just want to talk about possibly the finest fart gag in a long time, and it's so good that is the fact that essentially they did the same gag twice, but for some reason it works even better the second time. I don't know how it played with your audience, but I mean, it was a quite sparsely populated unlimited preview at Cineworld where I saw it, but even then, the sort of like 34 people who watched it were ending themselves at this. So for a bit of context, Paul Matthews, Nick Cage's character, has gone back to a young woman's apartment to recreate a dream that she has. It's the first time that he's found out that he's been interactive in a dream, and it's this girl's sort of sex fantasy. And he's sort of playing along with it and to try and help her out. And at one point, he sort of farts and then talks about how he's nervous, and it's a completely natural bodily function. It's actually very important and very healthy to do. And then things go a little bit further, and then he suffers a bit of premature ejaculation, but then followed by another fart. And for me, that was just the icing on the cake of that scene. It just shows how sort of sad and pathetic Paul is, in the one opportunity he has really to potentially exploit his celebrity and fame, and it just goes all so horribly wrong. And yeah, farts are still funny.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you, and I like that. Like, the reality is, like, the classic thing of everyone has their own 15 minutes of fame and so on, and like, this is his. So I think I do like how things go quite quickly from really good to really bad, and sort of it wraps from there and so on. And I really loved that scene. I mean, it got a huge belly laugh out of me for the first time, and I'm not someone to laugh out loud at the cinema. I'm more of a kind
Paul.
of, yeah, I'm more of like a little chortle, like, oh, that's very funny, good, 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 or just have a little smile. But that got me. And then again, and I had a pretty decent audience. It was in the biggest screen, and yeah, it got a really good reaction. And I mean, it's one of those ones that I went with my partner, and I am someone that enjoys a good fart, especially because I've been a bit unwell the past week, if people can hear it in my voice. And every time I have a little fart, she goes, "Is that you come now?" And it's just one of those ones. So, I think she said that one, and I maybe said it back about maybe 5 times since Saturday. So it's a great little moment, and so on. And it's just such good humor and so on. I was really glad I got to watch a film like this with an audience and just hear it go down so well.
Yeah, and so yeah, talking about the sort of like the satire, this was that scene we talked about was sort of Paul sort of delving into the world of, I guess, celebrity, kind of, the most famous man on the planet at one point, they say, and he sort of, it's like, what does he do with it? Can he use it for good or bad? And he has a meeting with a marketing agency, sort of run by Michael Cera, called Thoughts, just Thoughts. And they're sort of pitching stuff like, we want to use you to sell Sprite. You could appear in people's dreams holding a can of Sprite, and then everyone will want a Sprite. Whereas Paul just wants to be able to write a book about intelligence, the intelligence between ant colonies. That's all he wanted. He just wanted, to become a published author in the academic world. And so tries to do that, but no one really is all that keen on the idea. They want him to use him to become the next face of Sprite or other merchandising opportunities. And I mean, so what did you make of this marketing agency?
It's the classic thing. Once you're known for something, that's all people want to use you for. You think of some celebrities or people that have gone viral, like that's what they want. They don't want you to be more than that, and so on. And you're put within that bubble. Again, that was a brilliant scene. The whole thing, and just like it was just one of those ones. The word Sprite just now is very funny to me, and just the fact that they keep mentioning, we're talking about Sprite, and can maybe get Obama to dream about you, and I just love how that just comes up every so often. Is this frustration of like, oh, and any word on the Obama thing, and again, I liked how there is a film where this man of sort of like quote unquote integrity, a bit of a boffin, etc. He gets corrupted by it and he becomes all famous and vain and forgets all about his family, etc. And he goes down that route of kind of whoring himself out there to advertisers. Whereas I like how he's like, no, like I want to use this to make that book and so on. And I think that's something, again, you nailed it earlier. You want to feel sympathy and empathy for this guy and so on, and you're not sitting there screaming like, don't do this. Maybe there's that one scene where you're kind of doing that, but for the most part you're kind of supporting him and you're there for the whole 90 minutes of that journey. And I think that's something that's really, really important. And I did love that scene. Michael Cera was fantastic in it, and just, yeah, I'm still can't look at the word Sprite the same way again.
No, yeah, and I did love the running gag of the Obama thing, and that he's talking to his wife on the phone after how did the meeting go? And said, oh, yeah, they go down for the publishing thing, but they want me to sell Sprite, and she's like, Sprite, and he's like, but they were talking to Obama as well. It's like, and then as things get progressively worse, it's like, so where are we on the whole Obama thing? Is he still in and stuff like that? Desperately clinging to the idea that Obama's going to be able to pull him out of this hole, but instead it sort of goes down sort of the other route where he does write a book in the end. It is, to be fair, he does write the book, but not the one he wanted. Instead, writing about his experience of appearing in people's dreams. But it's a small French publishing outfit, which leads to the title "I Am Your Nightmare," and he's forced to put on like a Freddy Krueger style glove and things like that. And I know that they sort of, it was interesting to see that was, I mean, I guess quite understandably, this is an A24 film. There's a trailer for it which maybe makes it seem slightly more horrific and sensationalized than the end product. We all know It Comes at Night can be mentioned there. but the fact that it was interesting that the trailer did sort of play up the sort of nightmare aspect and the sort of Freddy Krueger glove and stuff like that. So it was interesting to see that it was actually just a very sort of small part and one that Paul didn't really want to play up at all.
Yeah, I like that, and one of my favorite bits of that sort of tour is just the bit where like the light falls and just hits him in the head, and it's just one of those moments where you're just like,
Guy
you
can't
feel like
catch a break.
yeah, you're just like, oh, for fuck's sake, and yeah, such a great one. I just really felt for him in that moment, and yeah, it's it's just again that's the importance of the film and Cage's performance and this character is that you just feel for him because that could have been any of us, or we maybe it's our little message to just take it, not take for granted, an ordinary life, being with people that care for you, love you, because something that could be out with completely your control could kind of take that away and so on, which is just one of the things that's truly unfair in life. I know for me, I'm not one to get pissed off or rattled easily, but when there's a problem that's out with my control where I can't fix it and things is having an impact on me, that annoys me. I can't address it, and I can certainly empathize with Paul's thoughts there.
Yeah. Be careful what you wish for, people. Be careful what you wish for. So it's interesting that as the story progresses and sort of Paul's sort of 15 minutes of fame sort of comes to an end, we sort of get a hint of what the wider world is going to be post Paul Matthews, because he appeared in everyone's dreams for a while, and then just as randomly as it started, it seems to end. But why leave it there? If there's a way to make money out of this, people are going to make money out of this, and that's where we're kind of introduced into a cameo from a Succession star, Nicholas Braun, with a device that I think it was called the Noglia, which allows people to enter other people's dreams with a specific purpose, really, in order to advertise products. So the way that Nick Cage would have been advertising Sprite in people's dreams, people could just jump into your dream and sell you products. And it's probably sort of the weakest part for me. I because Nick Cage sort of kind of drifts out of the story at that point, but it's funny, but it's also completely believable that if someone was able to harness that technology, it's exactly what would have happened. I mean, it sort of reminded me of, was it Minority Report about 20 years ago, with the sort of with Tom Cruise sort of walking through the mall. Whenever he makes eye contact with a store, he gets like a personalized advert telling him what's on in the store. So yes, if someone can make it happen, then someone will make it happen. Elon Musk has probably watched Dream Scenario and gone, can we do that? Can we do that? Can we get on that?
I agree. It is the weakest bit, and there was a bit in the film where it's kind of like, oh, the story has come to a natural kind of end at this point, and so on. Oh, this is kind of like the the prologue sort of thing about what happens next in that world, and it kind of felt like they kind of needed this sort of technology to set up what was a really sweet and loving kind of ending and so on. And shout out to Nicholas Braun in his second A24 film after Zola. But yeah, like the ending, which also pays tribute to another one of the best A24 films of the year, there was like, it was one of those ones I didn't like that section, but it needed it to pay off this really excellent ending, which I kind of can be a bit forgiving of for giving me that.
Yeah, it's not. It can't get the sort of full sort of 5-star ones for me, but it was a good solid 4. I think for me, 4 out of 5 for this one. I
Yeah,
think
same here.
yeah, I think it was. I really enjoyed watching it. There's a lot of interesting things to say. Kind of stumbles towards the end where it also sort of felt like, in a way, which is weird to say given it's a film full of ideas and stuff like that, it did kind of run out of steam slightly, where they got the central concept and they weren't entirely sure how to wrap it all. It's like it felt like the film was made longer when they could have potentially, like you say, it did feel like it was coming towards like an end that sort of cuts to black, and then it's got a photo of Paul, and you're like, oh gosh, what's happened to Paul? And then it sort of goes into this whole other thing, and you're like, oh, okay, but I'd kind of be interested to go back to what's happening with Paul, to be honest, because as ordinary as he was, he was still a very, very interesting character.
Yeah. And I think this is the best example. We spoke about it a few weeks ago, like A24 and IP and where does it go next. And I think this is just a reminder of what it does really, really well and so on. And, I don't know what the budget was on this film. I can imagine it was decent, but it's not hugely going to be spectacular. But this is the type of film that should hopefully do well with audiences. I know it's going to be going up against the Marvels, for example, this weekend as the counter-programming film. But films like this should be successful, and I was watching it thinking this would have been a big hit in the 90s and early 2000s, whereas there's the worry that this might just get overlooked and so on. But I really hope it's a hit. They've certainly invested in the marketing here in the UK anyway, which is a good sign, and it's one of these rare A24 films that come out in America at the same time as it comes out abroad, which is always a good sign of a product that people are confident in. So yeah, we'll certainly see how things unfold. But yeah, I was really charmed by the whole thing, and I'm the same. I'd give it a 4 out of 5. But God, I'd recommend it to most folk. I'd recommend it to my normie workmates or people that just enjoy a film. And I just think it's great to just see something original and a reminder of A24, that balance which I think they'll have to thread as they go forward.
Yeah, no, it's been interesting to see how much it's been pushed in the UK, certainly. Obviously, with the fact it was an unlimited screening, then obviously, yeah, the Cineworld were pushing it hard on the trailer front, and yeah, it does make for good counter programming against something like the Marvels this weekend. I know in the US, they've been doing a lot of preview screenings and stuff like that, where you can get your photo next to a cardboard cutout of Nick Cage's Paul Matthews. I would quite happily have one. To have in my house. But I guess we've got to see how well A24 can play. Are they going to start doing an ad campaign where people have dreamt? Are they going to talk about, are they going to try and do the actual thing of trying to get people dreaming about Nick Cage? Or will we find, are you going to now tonight dream about the fact that you can get the Midsummer screenplay book? Is that going to appear in your dream and you go, I really should buy that? Are we going to start seeing A24 candles or really expensive Priscilla jewelry in our heads and be forced to buy them because it's like, oh, I can't get it out of my head. I'm going to do it. Have you already pre-ordered the Midsummer screenplay?
I did look at it, and even with the membership discount, like
that shipping that gets you.
The shipping seems to have gone up in price. Where it was like,
Yeah.
I looked at it, I was like, that's nearly $100 and
Oof.
stuff. I was like, not this time. I'll maybe wait for a little while.
Wait for a couple of things, and then we'll do a joint order and split.
Yes, good idea. Good idea.
Excellent. So, yes, the end of another episode. Like I say, we're not sure what's going to be next because, we're kind of getting a bit dry. We do have actually Earth Mama comes out at the beginning of December, and we still have Medusa Touch to review. It's in the bank as well.
Yeah, there's that Shane Meadows A24 Pro show all on iPlayer as well. So we've got an interview with him just
back
standing
into
by.
the TV shows as well. That's what we need to do. Yes.
We could have a wee look at that. iPlayer, no adverts. We've got an interview. Hey, that's something sorted for a winter's night coming soon.
Absolutely, so great. So hopefully you have enjoyed this episode, and perhaps you may even see us in your dreams. We'll see you next time.